world before streaming. When Saturday meant arcades, action flicks, and Saturday morning cartoons. One podcast dares to hit play on the greatest era in entertainment history. From Atari to MTV, from blockbusters to boomboxes. Join us as we rewind time and relive the sights, sounds, and stories that defined a generation. This is Retro Playback, rewinding the golden age of gaming and pop culture.
Welcome back to Retro Replay. The 80s, the podcast where we dust off your Trapper Keeper, rewind the VHS, and take you straight back to the greatest decade in human history. Folks, today we are time traveling to a very specific moment, October 1987. And let me tell you, October 87 was not a quiet month. It was chaotic, it was iconic, and the pop culture was absolutely on fire. We've got the hottest video games dropping right now on your NES, the TV lineup that had 40 million Americans glued to their sets on Thursday nights. Movies that were melting faces in movie theaters across the country. And one of the biggest financial disasters in American history happened right in the middle of all of it. And somehow people still showed up to rent a movie afterward. Because that's who we were in 1987. Resilient, stylish, and slightly confused about the stock market. All right, before we dive into the fun stuff, let's paint the picture. It's October 1987. Ronald Reagan is in the White House. Big hair is mandatory. Shoulder pads are structural. Your TV is a 27-inch behemoth that weighs as much as a small car, and it sits on its own dedicated piece of furniture. You needed a cabinet for your TV. A cabinet. That is power. Your VCR is blinking 12 o'clock because you have no idea how to set the clock. And honestly, neither does your dad. We all lived like that. Nobody's VCR ever said the right time. It was the great equalizer. Now, here's the big elephant in the room for October 87, and we have to address it because it actually affected everything, including how people were feeling about going out to movies and buying stuff. On October 19, 1987, the United States stock market experienced what became known as Black Monday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 508 points in a single day, a 22.6% loss. To put that in perspective, that was actually worse by percentage than any single day during the Great Depression. Worldwide losses were estimated at $1.71 trillion. With a T in one day. And here's the part I love. You know what people did the following weekend? They went to see Fatal Attraction and The Princess Bride. Americans didn't even skip a beat. The economy is in freefall, and people are like, well, I already paid for the sitter, so... Iconic. Absolutely iconic behavior. That's the American spirit right there. Also happening in October 87, the Minnesota Twins are in the middle of winning the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals. They take it in Game 7 on October 25th. There is a lot going on, and somehow, through all of it, people were still loading up their NES and playing games. Because priorities. Okay. Let's talk video games. And I need everyone listening to understand, October 1987 is one of the most absurdly stacked months in gaming history. Like, if you were a kid with an NES in October of 87, you were blessed. Your parents were probably broke from buying you cartridges, but you were blessed. Let's start with the biggest drop of the month. Nintendo, in their infinite wisdom, releases Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! For the NES in October 1987. For the uninitiated, and if you're uninitiated, first of all, how dare you? Punch-Out! Is a boxing game where you play as Little Mac, this tiny little underdog from the Bronx, and you work your way up through increasingly ridiculous opponents to fight Mike Tyson himself. And Little Mac is so small compared to these guys. He's fighting dudes twice his size. The screen cuts him off at the waist, sometimes, because the opponents are so large. Now, Mike Tyson in October 1987 was the scariest human being alive. He had just unified the heavyweight title earlier that year. The man was 20 years old and punching people into another dimension. So to have him as the final boss of a video game in 1987, the cultural weight of that, kids were genuinely scared of the final fight. You put in that code 007-373-5963, and you were sweating. We all know that code. You either memorized it, or you had it written on a piece of paper taped to your TV stand. Tape. On the TV stand. That was our version of a save file. Here's a fun fact. The game is so iconic that Punch-Out is often described as more of a puzzle game than a fighting game. Every opponent has a pattern, a tell, and you have to learn their timing. It's almost like a rhythm game before rhythm games existed. Glass Joe's tell is that he wiggles his head a tiny bit before he throws a right hook. I have not played this game in 30 years, and I still know that. Also dropping in October 1987. Maniac Mansion from LucasArts. Maniac Mansion is a point-and-click adventure game that is genuinely weird and funny and horror-adjacent. You're trying to rescue your girlfriend from a mad scientist whose family has been possessed by a meteor. Standard Tuesday, but here's why Maniac Mansion is historically massive. It was the first game ever to use the SCUM engine, which stands for Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion. And before SCUM, adventure games required you to type in commands. Like, you'd have to type pickup key or open door and hope the game understood you. And if you typed the wrong synonym, grab key, instead of pickup key, the game just said, no. Didn't know what you meant. Good luck. I want to throw the whole computer out the window just thinking about it. SCUM changed everything. You could just click on commands from a menu. It sounds simple now, but in 1987, that was genuinely revolutionary. Every LucasArts adventure game from that point forward, Monkey Island, Day of the Tentacle, Indiana Jones, and The Fate of Atlantis, they all run on what Maniac Mansion started. So we're in October 1987, and you've got Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and Maniac Mansion dropping simultaneously, plus games like Contra, Castlevania, Double Dragon, The Legend of Zelda. Zelda just dropped in August in America, and Final Fantasy is coming at the end of the year in Japan. It is absolutely criminal how stacked 1987 is. If you were a parent trying to budget for Christmas in 1987, I'm so sorry. And NES cartridges were not cheap. We're talking $30, $40, sometimes $50 a cartridge in 1987 money. That's like $120 to $140 today. Plus, no internet, no reviews, no YouTube walkthroughs. You were buying blind based on the box art and a description that may or may not have been accurate. Half those box art illustrations looked like they were painted by someone who had heard a description of the game over a bad phone connection. So there's a guy and he's running and there's maybe an explosion? Perfect. Ship it. Also worth mentioning, in the arcades in October '87, you've got Operation Wolf absolutely dominating, and Outrun is still pulling kids away from their lunch money. The arcade was still a place you went in 1987. It wasn't dead yet. You'd walk into the arcade with a fistful of quarters, and it was genuinely a social event. The whole neighborhood was there. I miss that energy. Cannot be replicated. Thursday night was sacred. Okay, let's talk television. And specifically, let's talk about Thursday nights in 1987, because they were basically a national institution. Thursday night on NBC in 1987 was not just TV, it was an event. You did not call someone between 8 and 10 p.m. on a Thursday, you just didn't. Leading the charge, as it had been for years, is The Cosby Show on NBC. In the week of October 12th to 18th, 1987, The Cosby Show was pulling a 30.0 Nielsen rating with a 49 share and over 40 million viewers. 40 million viewers, one show, one night. The United States had 240 million people in 1987. That is almost 1 in 6 Americans watching the same show at the same time. There was no Netflix, no streaming, no DVR. You watched it live or you missed it. Period. And The Cosby Show was the show, the #1 rated program for that entire season. The Huxtables were America's family. Right behind it was the spin-off, A Different World, which had just launched that fall. It was already the #2 rated show in the country. Brand new show, instantly #2. That's how much goodwill The Cosby Show had built up. America was like, any show with these people? We're in. Then you've got Cheers at #3, The Golden Girls at 4, and on ABC, Growing Pains with Kirk Cameron and Who's the Boss with Tony Danza, rounding out the top 6. Kirk Cameron in 1987 was arguably the biggest teen idol in America. His face was on every Tiger Beat, every lunchbox. I feel like lunchbox might be an exaggeration. Also in October '87, you've got Alf, everyone's favorite sarcastic alien cat eater from Melmac, pulling strong numbers at NBC. Alf was number 10 for the season. Alf is such a fascinating show in retrospect. It's a hand puppet, a full-grown hand puppet in a sitcom, eating cats and making sarcastic wisecracks, and America loved him for 4 seasons. Now, here's a behind-the-scenes fact that genuinely blew my mind when I learned it. The Alf puppet was so complex and took up so much of the floor set that the actors had to film around holes in the floorboards where the puppeteers would operate him from below. They called it the pit. Cast members described it as absolutely exhausting because the sets were tiny, cramped, and they could barely move. So every time you see those actors laughing and having a good time with Alf on screen, they're actually standing over holes in the floor, sweating under hot studio lights, while puppeteers are crouched below them in the dark. The magic of television, folks. Now, October 1987 also marks something historically huge in TV. And it kind of snuck by everyone, because there wasn't a big announcement or anything. The Simpsons had debuted as an animated short on The Tracy Ullman Show earlier in 1987. In October, those little yellow characters are on TV, though nobody knew yet what they'd become. They're just a weird little interstitial cartoon at this point. Bart and Homer fighting in the living room between Tracy Ullman sketches. Nobody has any idea that 30 years later this thing is still on the air. And here's the kicker. Tracy Ullman was the original voice of Marge Simpson. Before Julie Kavner took it over full-time. The history is wild. Also debuting in this season, married and with children on this new, scrappy little network called Fox. Fox launched nationally in 1987. They weren't even included in the USA Today ratings chart yet, because Nielsen hadn't fully integrated them. This ragtag little fourth network. Nobody thought it would last. And it launched with a show about a grumpy shoe salesman and his dysfunctional family that was basically the anti-Cosby Show in every possible way. Al Bundy would have hated Cliff Huxtable, and honestly, the tension that created in the culture was beautiful. 2 different visions of American family life, existing simultaneously on your television. All right, the movies. Oh, the movies of October 1987. Let's go to the multiplex. And by multiplex, we mean a 6-screen theater in a strip mall next to a Sizzler, and the popcorn costs 50 cents and comes in a paper bag. Those were simpler times, and I miss them every single day. Okay. The biggest film in theaters during October 1987 is Fatal Attraction, which technically opened on September 18th, but was still absolutely dominating the box office all through October. Fatal Attraction. Michael Douglas cheats on his wife with Glenn Close. Glenn Close does not take it well. The rest is cinema history. This movie was a cultural earthquake. It became the second highest-grossing film of 1987, ultimately earning over $320 million worldwide on a $14 million budget. It made people genuinely afraid. Not in a horror movie way, in a this could actually happen to someone you know way. The phrase bunny boiler entered the English language because of this movie. Glenn Close's performance is absolutely terrifying and completely riveting. She got an Academy Award nomination for it. Men across America were, shall we say, reconsidering their life choices. The divorce lawyer business probably boomed in late 1987. I just need to get my affairs in order before Glenn Close finds out about my affairs. Also in theaters in early October, having opened September 25th and still running strong, is The Princess Bride. The Princess Bride, the perfect film, directed by Rob Reiner, written by William Goldman, adapting his own novel. Starring Cary Elwes, Robin Wright, Mandy Patinkin, Andre the Giant, Wallace Shawn, Billy Crystal, this cast is ridiculous. It's a fairy tale. It's a comedy. It's a romance. It's a swashbuckler. It somehow does all of those things at once, and none of them feel crowded. Here's the interesting footnote. The Princess Bride was not a massive box office hit in 1987. It made about $30 million, which was decent, but not a blockbuster by any means. It got great reviews and then sort of quietly became one of the most beloved films of all time through cable TV and home video. That is such a 1980s success story. The movie that didn't dominate theaters, but lived on every single cable channel for the next decade until every kid in America had seen it 40 times. As you wish. Inconceivable. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. These are not movie quotes. These are part of the American vernacular. Also dropping on October 2nd, Near Dark, which is a genuine cult vampire western directed by Catherine Bigelow. Yes, that Catherine Bigelow, who later directed The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30. And it is wild and underrated, and if you haven't seen it, go fix that. And then on October 9th, you've got Baby Boom with Diane Keaton, about a high-powered Manhattan executive who suddenly inherits a baby and has to completely rethink her life. Very much a movie of its moment. The whole women can have careers and families, but here's how hard that is. Genre was really hitting its stride in 1987. And coming up fast at the end of October, Fatal Beauty with Whoopi Goldberg opens October 30th. And hovering on the horizon, about to obliterate the entire box office in November, is Three Men and a Baby, which would become the #1 film of 1987 with $167 million. Three Men and a Baby. Tom Selleck, Ted Danson, Steve Guttenberg, 3 confirmed bachelors raising a baby. The formula was simple. It was perfect. America went absolutely bananas for it. Ted Danson was coming straight off Cheers at the height of its popularity. Tom Selleck was Magnum P.I. They were 2 of the biggest stars in America. And of course, Three Men and a Baby has the famous urban legend that there was a ghost of a little boy visible behind the curtain in one scene. Kids in 1987 would rewind the VHS over and over trying to see the ghost. It was just a cardboard standee of Ted Danson's character from an earlier scene in the movie. There was no ghost, but the legend lived for years. We were so easily entertained before the internet. It was beautiful. Okay, rapid fire. Let's do some of the funnier and weirder stuff from October 1987 that you might not know. So remember how we mentioned Black Monday on October 19th? The stock market crashes 22.6% in one day. Here's what's wild. The Oliver Stone film Wall Street, starring Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen, was in post-production and coming out in December of 1987. The timing was so eerie that people genuinely thought the film had somehow predicted the crash. Greed is good as a villain's speech, and then the actual Wall Street collapses 2 months before the movie drops? The marketing department must have been sweating and celebrating simultaneously. Also, on October 30th, 1987, Halloween Eve, in Japan, NEC releases a new gaming console called the PC Engine. It's called the TurboGrafx 16 when it eventually comes to the US. Japan is already getting next-gen hardware, while Americans are still fighting over who gets to hold the second NES controller. The console wars were already starting in 1987, and we didn't even know it yet. Here's a great one. Valerie Harper, who had been the star of her own NBC sitcom, literally called Valerie, was fired from her own show in 1987 over a salary dispute. The show was then renamed Valerie's Family, and eventually The Hogan Family, and it continued for 4 more seasons without her. You get fired from a show with your name in the title, and the show just keeps going. That is a particular kind of Hollywood cold-blooded ruthlessness. She sued NBC and won, for the record. But the show continued, without Valerie, just out here calling itself Valerie's Family, while Valerie is gone. Absolutely unhinged. What a business. And finally, the NBC technicians' strike, which had been going on for 118 days, ended on October 24, 1987. For context, NBC's broadcast engineers had been on strike all summer. The network had been limping along with management filling in for technical roles. The fact that Cosby was still pulling 40 million viewers while the crew was on strike is either a testament to the show's strength or evidence that Americans just really weren't paying attention to the credits. Okay, let's bring it home. October 1987. The stock market crashed, the Minnesota Twins won the World Series, Mike Tyson was both a real person and a video game boss. Fatal Attraction had everyone terrified of their own love lives. The Princess Bride was quietly beginning its journey to becoming immortal. Thursday night TV was basically a national church service. And somewhere in a strip mall arcade, a kid was pumping quarters into Outrun and didn't know or care about any of it. Folks, thank you so much for rewinding the clock with us today. I hope this took you back, or if you weren't alive yet in 1987, we hope it made you wish you were. If you love this episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a 5-star review. It seriously helps. And hit us up on social media. I want to hear your October 1987 memories. What were you playing? What were you watching? Were you one of those 40 million Cosby Show viewers? Until next time, this is Retro Replay, the 80s.